Good evening. Welcome to the New School. I'm Karen Coney. I'm the director of the Viralis Center for Art and Politics, and we are absolutely delighted to host TimesTalks with the New York Times tonight, the New School's 44th TimesTalk since 2003. Our collaboration with TimesTalks reflects the New School's dedication to addressing pressing cultural and social issues and supporting creative expression in the social sciences, media, philosophy, design, and the arts. At the Viralis Center, we go as far as declaring art a political practice and curate programs that advance this concept, among them an international biennial prize for art and politics that this year celebrates a project on forced international migration, or a new publication dedicated to art and social justice with a contribution on tonight's featured guest speaker. On behalf of the New School, I'd like to thank the New York Times and the Public Art Fund, as well as the Advisory Committee of the Viralis Center, for their steadfast support of this crucial work that allows us to think and act differently in this political moment. It is now my pleasure to introduce Michelle Gray, Director of Public Programs at TimesTalks. Please help me welcoming Michelle, and thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Gray, the Director of Programming for the New York Times live conversation series, TimesTalks, which pairs New York Times journalists with the brightest and boldest minds from the fields of film, theatre, music, art, fashion, literature, and science. We'd like to give a very special thank you to our long-term time collaborators at the New School, in particular our co-presenters for this evening's program, the Viralis Center, and of course, Public Art Fund, who are celebrating their 40th anniversary this year. I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's event with Ai Weiwei, one of the leading cultural figures of our time. Earlier this week, Public Art Fund presented Weiwei's timely new exhibition, curated by Nicholas Baum, across all 5 boroughs, called Good Fences Make Good Neighbors. Inspired by the international migration crisis and tense socio-political battles surrounding the issue in the United States and worldwide, Weiwei has conceived of this ambitious multi-site project as a way of transforming the metal wire security fence into a powerful artistic symbol. Moderating tonight's conversation is Vivian Yee, a national immigration correspondent at the New York Times. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Vivian Yee and Ai Weiwei.
So, Ai Weiwei, thank you so much for coming to speak with us. I know everyone seems very excited, and I know I am too. I'm relatively new to writing about immigration myself for the New York Times, so I think I'm going to learn a lot tonight. If we could have the first image, please. I first wanted to talk about your installation, Good Fences Make Good Neighbors, and I'm sure many of you, being a downtown crowd, you've seen the Washington Square Arch filled with this sort of cage. And Weiwei, you spent more than a decade living in New York on the Lower East Side, if I'm not mistaken. Why did you choose New York to come back to for this show?
Well, since I got involved with the refugee crisis, and besides making this film, I maybe had 10 other museum shows, and I all have refugee-related projects. But this New York City is a very special one, and Public Art Fund is very different from museums and galleries. So it's it's a good opportunity for me. It's a city, as you mentioned, I lived over 10 years, and I have a quite strongly emotionally relate to this city. I feel in this city, almost everyone, migrants or children of refugees from somewhere. So it's place so much relate to my past and relate to current situation. So.
Is that where you said you have an emotional connection to the city? Is that because it was full of newcomers like yourself, immigrants like yourself?
Yes, this is the probably most strongest character of the city is the mix of people from all different kind of nations, different kind of religion and race, and speak different language, and also different class. You have and a lot of culturally oriented or literature, art, performance. So I think it's a perfect city for me to make this project.
Mm-hmm. You were here as a very young, kind of fledgling artist, and then you left to go back to China after about a decade. Do you think you would have become a different kind of artist or something else entirely if you had stayed in New York, or how would your art be different?
I think in the life, in any moment, if I don't walk on this road, I walk on that road, I will be very different, especially in my life. Nothing is really happened as planned, and everything happens as a surprise. So I never imagined I would sit in this new school.
I never imagined I'd be sitting here with you
very
either.
beautiful crowd and a beautiful room, and to talk about those issues. Even just half a year before, and I wouldn't think about because that time we were very busy in making this film, and also we were preparing for the show, Good Friends That Make Good Neighbors. When we do our artwork, we only think about the size, the site, the structure, and the form, and how to communicate. But now a show become different. After a show, you have to do so many talks. Yes. And English is not my language. I can talk much better and in Chinese. Yeah, so.
But you feel it's important to explain the show in English?
I love to do it in Chinese. Yeah, it would be much funnier or interesting.
They seem to find you pretty funny and interesting anyway, so.
Okay.
So you've talked in the past about how you grew up as a displaced person when your father, who was a dissident poet in China, was in political exile. So right now you're living in Berlin after being detained famously by the Chinese authorities. Do you consider yourself an immigrant, a political refugee?
I never paid much attention because I was kind of forced out after so many years of detention, and this only possibility is to send my son out to study outside. And that's the reason I also moved out. If I don't have my son, I'm not necessarily would be out, even it's very dangerous there. but still 2 of my lawyers are still in jail, and many of my friends being detained without trial. Nobody knows where they are, and even their family. And they couldn't even have lawyers. So I'm not scared. I just don't want my son to be in the same kind of condition as I grew up. That time my father was exiled, and he would have no choice to send me out. He's very patriotic, and there's simply no way anybody can come out from China.
So now you're in Berlin, by choice, as you say, although obviously you would have many freedoms restricted were you to be in China. What is your relationship to your home country at this point? I mean, you're basically in exile because of your artwork about the Chinese government. What is it like to continue to make art about China or raise your voice about China from a country that's across the globe that's completely different from China?
Well, even in China had so much fight and argument with authorities, but I never thought that was a problem with China. I think human rights and freedom of speech is a value which is common value. It's all related, So I often talk about those issues in a much larger context. But of course, I use that kind of measurement to measure China, which after a while you feel a little bit tired because you're always asked very, very essential. It's nothing really profound there. It's just very basic. And the argument never really can go, or discussions can never go deeper. It's just, they clearly tell you cannot speak, you cannot talk about it. And they will never explain to you why we cannot talk about it. So they're very smart, so they never get into that kind of discussion. They just simply say, shut up, otherwise you'll be in jail. So I don't have much feeling when I left. Because you as someone, I wouldn't even call myself a citizen, because in China nobody really can be entitled to call us a citizen, because nobody have a right to vote, and never have a chance to give out your opinion, and you've never been counted as an individual. So after so many years, I realized I would not do much if I cannot have my voice to be heard in China. My social media blogs been shutting down since 2009. So then I got on Twitter, but nobody can read Twitter in China. You need a special skill to get on internet. Yeah, and very often, even today, even to get on the foreign internet like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram can be considered as a crime, because you use the special tool to help you to so-called climb the wall. So China is building this great firewall. The whole is, and created a lot of called the internet police, watching every line, every citizen post, even just their chatting or gossip, but they are watching every line, and many vocabularies cannot be used on internet. If that vocabulary come out, that your discussion can be disappeared or being shut off. So it's a very different situation.
That brings me to something that I meant to ask you later. So a few years ago, you were one of the internet and Twitter's kind of great free speech success stories. Through Twitter and the internet, you could reach a huge audience. You could kind of express yourself in a way that you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, or reach an audience that you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, until, of course, the Chinese authorities censored you and shut that down. But now the conversation in the US is more about how technology platforms like Twitter and Facebook can be used or abused to enable hate speech or to spread bad information, fake news, or to deepen the political divide, or even to be manipulated by outside powers like the Russians. Do you think the internet should continue to be as open and flexible as it has been? Or, given your experience with being censored in China, do we need to rethink how it's being used?
Well, internet being used as water or as a raining, it could have a good side or a bad side. Really depends on situation. So, but in general, I think internet is probably the best thing happened to the society when an individual can have their own information and knowledge and to express it themselves or oneself. So I think that never happened in human history. All those power always belong to, people have a social status or political status. But the internet is a real liberation for individual. Of course, there's a lot of power abuse. The power also loves internet. And
I just wanted to return to your installation, if we could show the second image. So this is a bus stop in Brooklyn, actually near where I live, and it's one of your kind of cages next to the bus stop. And so one of the New York Times art critics reviewed your installation across the city last week, and he praised it overall, which makes it much less awkward for me tonight. But he said one really striking thing. He said that it disturbed him that the works kind of plugged into the city so easily, that they didn't disrupt the daily lives of people, shopping on Fifth Avenue or waiting for the bus, which to him was a kind of metaphor for how we've all accepted these boundaries and these borders and barriers in our lives and in our politics. How did you intend for people to interact with the works in the city?
Well, I don't want to disturb the people who use the city as a tool or instrument. And but as artwork, you always bring some unfamiliar condition, some uneasiness there. So you always have to control how much you would add to the work to carry the concept. And you also have to bring some familiarness to the city. City as a ready-made. So you use the city, the facilities, and the bus station or light pole banners and all those public square and market banners on market. So I think we are very carefully use those familiar elements, but to put some message in there. And artwork is always a test. It's never meant to be safe. It could be, people could think it does have some meaning or maybe not. It's not really guaranteed. That's why I like to make art, is only because it's a little bit dangerous and a little bit unknown situation. You provide a situation which is not commonly you would see.
And it sort of leaves some space for people to bring their own interpretation to it?
Well, it's a public space, so people are entitled to give opinion about it. People may feel it's too much, or it's not relevant, or people may like it. It's really very much depends on their own experience, relate to art, or do they know me, or it's many different. If we look at art, it's always, you need knowledge if you walk into a museum. If you don't have that knowledge, I mean, I don't think people would think all those things are art or also valuable, so.
Right, they could just be fakes on a wall, I guess.
That's true, you needed to have some brainwash there. So.
So I went to see the Washington Square Arch and also your Gilded Cage at Central Park South yesterday. And at both places I saw people attaching their own art or their own protests, basically piggybacking their own activities onto what you had put there. So at the Gilded Cage, there was a Chinese man who had taped a banner across the cage criticizing the Chinese education system in Chinese and English. And at the Arch, there was one of those fake statue guys, the ones who paint themselves all white. So he was sort of clinging onto the arch and taking advantage of the crowd that had gathered to see your work. I mean, what do you make of that people are, piggybacking onto your art?
It's okay if they're touching it temporarily or not destroy it. It's public art, but quite strangely, my work always attracts certain kind of people. I really feel sorry for myself, and it's quite. I have to think about it.
So do you anticipate this when you install things across the city like this, that people may disrupt it in their own way?
Oh, yeah. I think this is, anything can happen.
And when you say a certain kind of person, what would you say that kind of person is? I like people with some humors to react, but sometimes maybe they also look at me like someone lacking of creativity or so somehow. So they want to add their own spice to it. That's funny. So with your recent focus on refugees and immigration, we're also accustomed to seeing you wield your art to protest or question the Chinese government. And a few years ago, I read that you described yourself as a chess player. You make a move, then your opponent makes a move, and we are used to thinking of your opponent as the Chinese authorities. What does it mean to practice your style of art when there isn't one opponent or one authority you're pushing back against, but this whole international refugee immigration crisis with many different players? In some sense, it feels like you're protesting all of our indifference to what's going on. Who's the opponent here?
Well, it's not, I'm lucky enough, it's not very difficult to find an opponent today. Otherwise I would be raised. And it's just, I'm so lucky living in this time.
You're right, there are many conflicts to choose from.
Yeah, if I name it, we'll spend hours here, so.
Okay, so your answer would be that the whole world, or?
Yeah. I see, since as a conversation between you and me, I like to have a conversation. I like to have an argument. I would like to discuss, and it's interesting to realize yourself and to realize that there's another, person. I think that's most exciting thing for me.
Okay. So I'd like to play a clip from the documentary called Human Flow. It's the first clip, please. So I wanted to show that because, first of all, I think it's just a beautiful kind of image, but I think it really encapsulates so many of the issues that you present in the documentary. There's one quote that you put on screen, a line by a Persian poet that goes, "I am that sea, and have come into a bowl. And to me, that sums up how so much of what we're seeing with refugees and migration these days is about huge numbers of people getting bottled up in a system that just isn't prepared to deal with this many people. And because of that, it's hard to see each of them as individuals. How do you deal with that in this work?
How do I deal with that?
Yeah, do you feel that part of your mission with the documentary was to get us to see them as individuals, or is it okay that you're kind of depicting a crowd that is essentially faceless?
Well, when I started to film, and it started from my iPhone, and there was a boat approaching Lesbos in Greece, right in front of our car, and I was driving with my son and my girlfriends to have a vacation there. Well, I know a lot of refugees will come, so that's why I told them we'll have a vacation to go to there. And that moment, I realized these things are not so simple. When you see people come down those boats, really come like, I never met people like that, They look different, very different religion, very different language, very different kind of habit, and old people, babies, young ladies, all kind of people come down from the boat. So I said, why they have to leave their home, come to a land, nobody would understand them. And nobody receiving them, except some volunteers there. It's very few. So this is Europe. So I never expect this can happen like this. It's not in my knowledge, not even in my imagination to see people, both sides, and people desperately trying to save their own life or their children, and on the other side, nobody pays much attention. This is not just one boat. That little island have over 500,000 people already come. Right. They would walk, after they get on the island, they would walk about 70 kilometers away to register. So they have to sleep on the road, and it's just, it seems they don't exist. And like a ghost, of course they don't exist. They cannot even talk. Nobody understands their language. But so with all those curiosity, I said I have to get involved. So for artists, how do you get involved? It's just to learn where they come from and who are they, why, what really happened to them, why they have to do all those, So I start to organize my team to say, okay, let's move my studio to Lesbos. And people are quite surprised to say, you really want to move your studio to here? I said, yes, we want to start shooting.
Your entire operation?
Yes, I feel myself too lonely to be there. And I need some people, the only people I can grab is my studio people, so. They all like me, and they have been involved with many dramatic situations. So, but we never imagined can be in this scale. So we decided to go to the other side of the ocean, that's Turkey, to see how those smugglers and how they really get on the boat. And then we go to different camps. Turkey is nation had maybe the most refugees, 3 million people there settled or being sent back to Turkey. Then I think that's not enough, because what is refugee? And those refugees come from the Syria war. But I want to know more about the history of refugees. That's why I go to Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, Gaza. Then we went to Africa, and Bangladesh, then Iraq, and Afghanistan, Pakistan, and also we go to Italy and France, where the refugee also have a long history in there, and also in Germany. So that gradually got me involved. Of course, during the shooting we have to quickly arrange more teams or to crews to cover different area, because it all happens at the same time. So gradually we have over 200 people working on this project. Wow. And of course it's a big organization, and we have a strong research team, a lot of fixers, because many locations are dangerous, still in war, like in Syria and in Iraq. Mm-hmm. And that's how this film is being made.
So as a journalist, I've always struggled with this question. I can tell people stories, I can describe what seem to be injustices or problems, like the refugee crisis, and maybe it'll make some people more aware of what's going on, but a lot of the time it doesn't necessarily feel like it has any effect. So you went to so many places for this documentary to tell this story. Do you judge your artwork by the effect that it has, or is there some other standard that you're measuring it by?
Well, as I said, it's a really personal journey to try to understand it. But I always involved, because I always put myself as someone else. So if I can learn something from it, I'm sure someone else also can learn something from it. And the journey is very meaningful to me. It helps me to understand the world, what's going on, in many ways, about the people who is unfortunate, and what caused them to become so unwanted or
unwanted,
become nobody. This always cause. And why Europe or United States cannot give them some empathy or support. Why, all those questions lead me to some kind of action, and it may not work for others, but it does work for me, and that's most important. I'm a very selfish person. It's true, it's really from bottom of my heart to want to understand another person. So
I think this leads us in perfectly to the second clip that I want to play from Human Flow. So you're in this documentary a lot, whether it's just shots of you walking around or talking to refugees. Why did you choose to put so much of yourself in?
Well, beside myself, what else can I do? I see myself as someone approach them. It's very funny. You change passport. I mean, this man, all the refugees loves their passport, but there's the only one cares. Nobody cares about their passport. Nobody even cares where they really come from. They're all one person. They're refugee. And many nations doesn't even give them status as refugee, as you know. Sometimes they call them guests. So they don't even get the rights as a refugee. And they're nobody. And my passport I just come back for 2 years. I never even allowed to have a passport. So it's all about our relations to the nation and to those nationalities and the individual's rights to make a move or to stay somewhere have become so complicated. And for those people, they may never find a place they can call home in their lifetime.
I thought, right. I mean, I thought this was an interesting moment because you're living in Berlin, which is not really your country, your home. This Syrian man is trying desperately to make it to Berlin or a place like Berlin because he doesn't have a home either. And here you are offering him your studio kind of as a joke. But to him, it's basically life or death. I mean, are you equating his tent and your
Well, he
studio?
doesn't even understand what is studio. You know, how would he understand that, you know, this artist have a very luxurious studio? You know, what studio mean there, you know? So, but I understand what his tent is like. It's wet, it's cold, it's no light. You know, it's so small, the whole family, maybe 5 or 10 people have to crawl into it. And, you know, it's a horrible situation for those people. They have to spend months or sometimes years in this kind of condition. Nobody would tell them what will happen next, you know, So.
You were saying earlier that you just can't believe that this country and European countries won't do something for the refugees. And obviously this has become a really huge issue here in the US, especially after President Trump took office with immigrants from Mexico and Central America coming to America. For you, what does it mean that the US, which you immigrated to as a young man, is struggling with the same questions about who should be let in?
Well, if I don't want to get too much discussion in U.S. politics, but
it's a dangerous minefield.
You say CNN would spend months or years just talk about same person. I mean, for me, that's very funny. You know, this is the same. This nation just, if you look at democracy or you look at this liberal world or the world we call is have a freedom, but all those very simple issues, you know, relate to very basic human dignity and very basic rights. You see how difficult and how selfish a nation be. So I don't want to discuss that much because I would feel ashamed if I'm a U.S. citizen to have a president like this. And I mean, it's not only him. It's not personal, but for society can have this kind of democratic society. You know, he's legally elected president. So how can I criticize the United States? It's not easy for a foreigner even to look at things like this. You know, we all believe U.S. have an extremely powerful period. You know, it's leading society in many aspects. But the fundamental value of everyone created equal. You know, those very, very simple. Besides American first. You know, so you see how backwards this nation become, and also how much it affects our way of thinking, our vision, our understanding of ourselves, the courage. And for me, it's quite sad to look at a situation like this. But this is reality. We all live in this reality, and we all feel quite comfortable about the reality. You know, of course, we may say something different, but I think the life here is so comfortable, and that comfort doesn't really structure us intellectually in think about humans' dignity and our modern society. And I think this is unimaginable.
I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this question, because I want to be careful here, but it must be strange for you as someone who fought for so long, as you were saying before, for very, very basic human freedoms, voting, free speech, whatever. We have all of those things in the US, and it seems like you're saying that those freedoms have still led us to a place that you don't think we should be in.
I don't think this kind of freedom really put the U.S. much better position than even authoritarian society. And it's very hard to accept that, but it seems in many ways, if you look at the political condition, and it's very hard to make any kind of meaningful decisions in this society. And a very simple argument can lasting for extremely long and political struggle with it. So I think it's very little profound discussion about what really happening today. And people just simply blame someone or some, but I think the problem is much profound, and I need really I need much intelligence or discussion on that. Of course, not for today.
Yes, I don't know if we have time to get into all the questions that you've just raised, but in fact we do have some time for an audience Q&A, and there are going to be microphones at either end of either aisle, and I just want to say my overlords at the New York Times have reminded me to say that we want to let as many people as possible ask questions, so when you do come up to the microphones, please keep it short. We've had some issues with monologuers recently, people asking for selfies or to throw roses at our guests. So please just keep it to questions, and we would all really appreciate that. And so please go up to the microphones at either end if you wish to ask a question. And I'm going to be asking a couple from our Facebook Live audience as well. But let's start with you.
Hi, I'm curious about your role as a father. What are you teaching your son, and what do you think we can be giving off to the next generation?
My son is 8 years old, and I try not to teach him much. You have to really try. Then you find out those children are really smart. I really found out a baby or even very young baby, they just don't speak same language, but their intelligence is very high. So that's why I don't teach them much, and I also don't think they shouldn't have my knowledge. And the world become dramatically different, and they would maybe speak different kind of language, and I try not to influence him that much.
Let's go to this side.
Hello. You said the question of what's happening today is very profound. If you could just say quickly, what did you mean when you said that? What do you want to say when you say that the question of what's happening today is very profound?
Could you rephrase the question, maybe?
Yes, I will rephrase. The last question that Vivian asked you, you said you look at what the world is like today, and you say the question of what is happening right now is very profound and not easy to talk about quickly. Mm-hmm. But is there any way you could just give a little insight into what you meant when you said that?
Well, if I have to talk about my feelings, basically, I'm an artist. I get involved with all kinds of situations, only because I have to find out who I am, and only through my action or my, you can call it artworks or my behaving, I become understand myself. It's a process. I don't think everybody can take same kind of process, you know. That's why you have an education. People will stay in school for 20, 30 years and basically do nothing, just read to so-called to get the knowledge. And after that, you get pretty tired, you already trained, and you act almost same way. And of course, you get same answer before even you ask a question. So I think probably the education has problem. The social values also have a very big problem, and make people. On the surface, we always talk about individuality, but in reality, there's very little individuality there. So maybe I can just add up a little bit like this.
Okay. Let's go to this side.
Hi, thank you for being here, and thanks for the work that you're doing on this serious topic. I wanted to ask, having been to so many places in person and seeing this as a witness firsthand, what was your experience around the borders and with the Border Patrol, for example, and were there groups on the ground, maybe like Doctors Without Borders, that were helpful in these scenarios, or did you find any other groups outside of governments that were helping people on the ground more than not?
I think she's asking about whether there were any NGOs or nonprofit groups that you found helpful with refugees or with immigration, if I'm interpreting your question correctly.
I think what happened in this so-called refugee crisis, one quite interesting character is a lot of NGOs or volunteers working on those matters, simply because the government hesitates, especially European government hesitate to really act, or either they're very slow or they act the way which is not so human. So there's a lot of individuals and young people who has knowledge, has skill, and some even high-tech person or from all from every professions in the society, lawyers, doctors, teachers, and also a lot of people taking care of the children. You know, it's a lot of those people motivate themselves to help. So that's a very interesting aspect.
Right, you mentioned that when you first were on the Greek island, you saw volunteers.
Yeah,
were the only ones dealing with it.
A lot of volunteers from England, from Denmark, from Spain. Very, very good people from Spain to rescue people in the ocean, and also from the United States. Yeah.
So let's do a quick question from Facebook Live, which I guess this is being streamed on. Hello, Facebook Live. So Justin from Facebook asks, do you think censorship inspires or suppresses creativity? How does protest art differ from country to country?
I think censorship, of course, it really destroys creativity, especially in the nation when your writing and your art can leading you to prison. So in those kind of society, not only destroys creativity, it destroys humanity. Simply in China, what happened in China is, since the establishment of the new government, the communist government, the censorship becomes so never changed. It becomes so strong even today. So basically, in China, not in literature, in art, or in film, there's almost no creativity there. It's either being censored or self-censored. Of course, it's still a lot of entertainment, but since there's no imagination, there's no no passion even, because you can never really do something you believe is right. You have to think, is that can be accepted by authority, which has already become a common rule being accepted by everyone in the society. Your parents, your friend, your classmate, anybody would tell you, if you do that, you're finished, So
the pressure comes not just from above, but from everyone around you.
They just have to punish a few people. The whole society will be scared. And they have been doing that in past 68 years.
You said at the very beginning of our conversation that it was sort of exhausting for you to continue making art in China because you were fighting for such basic values, freedom of speech and creativity and so on. And do you feel that moving to Berlin has given you the freedom to explore more complicated or more profound, as you said, issues?
I don't think so. I don't speak German. So, I moved there, still the studio is still likely in Beijing. It's just, but of course I can travel, I can do my refugee films. But seems German doesn't like that film either. And they don't like other people to talk about the film, talk about this issue that much. The German have very strong negative feelings about someone else from somewhere to talk about the situation. And you wouldn't believe how much censorship they would have. If you have heard there's a magazine called Spiegel.
Der Spiegel.
Der Spiegel.
Yeah.
They announced that they simply will not review this film.
Really?
I was so surprised, Wow. Yeah, even there's a German newspaper would say on the title, whatever Ai Weiwei do is wrong. It's quite strange society.
That is so interesting.
Yes, it is very interesting. I really wish I can have a German, I can have a really argument with them. But, I don't speak German, so it's too bad.
We'll have to stage a Times Talk in Berlin with one of our German-speaking reporters, I guess. Let me ask you another question from our Facebook audience. Dev from Facebook asks, what has been the most important impact of your work in your country? I'm guessing it means China.
Again, please.
What do you think has been the most important impact of your work in your country?
They let me out. They even dared to put me in jail in there. They let me out. So I think that means something there. Yeah. They think if they jail me, maybe I become a Mandela or somebody, But I don't think that will happen because nobody can survive in Chinese jail for that long.
And you mentioned before that several of your lawyers and your friends are in jail in China right now. Do you know anything about their conditions, or are you doing anything on their behalf?
I would cry on Twitter, but nobody can hear it in China. You know, you make a noise. It's very hard to even to explain to West what really happened to those people. But you know, for West to even remember Chinese name is difficult. It's not so easy. So, but of course, in China, nobody, as long as there's no voice, so that's fine. You know.
People are able to accept that there's silence.
Oh yes, everybody. You know, it's.
So I asked you backstage about your use of Instagram, which you said you took up in 2011, 5 or 6 years ago. What is your relationship to social media and the internet at this point? You said, you can say anything you want on Twitter outside of China, but it's like it makes no difference within China.
Yeah, I think only use social media is not enough. I really have to have action. I have to make, have to design the game, to design a trouble. And otherwise, it just seems you're not exist. So that's every day I'm thinking how to design a problem.
Design a problem for other people, like
for myself, for my own game. You play chess, then you think, okay, maybe how about I change some rule of playing. So you have to design that because you have to refresh yourself, and that's to realize you're still alive. So,
What is your next puzzle or problem going to be? If you can say.
You mean after this conversation? I would find a good restaurant. I'm still on this tour for promoting this human flow film. I did about 200 interviews in past 2 months. I start to realize how difficult after the production. I never imagined, I make a film, but I have to still do all those things. And I have to travel to many festivals. From here, I will go to Brazil, then go to Spain, then go to, also Germany. And I will have another 100 or 200 interviews. Yes, and it's a really tough job. It's like a professional sport person.
I'm glad we could give you some practice tonight.
I already lost some weight. I feel good. Sure.
Good. Well, now for something a little heavier. Charlie from Facebook asks, what direction do you see China going in over the next couple decades, politically and socially?
About 5 years ago, people asked me how long this communist state would last. I said 3 years. And but before 3 years, I was being put in jail. So if they can continuously put people in jail like they did to me, they can have a very long life. And this is a society which doesn't have any kind of establishment except the party. They have 80 million party members. Now they will have their 19th, how do you call it, parliament or some kind of congressional meeting.
Right, the parliament, the party congress.
Yeah, party congress. After 60, 70 years, they still don't trust their people. They don't let them to see voting ticket. They have a one-party system. The party controls the army, and it controls the media, and it controls the internet. So they can really last quite long.
Mm-hmm. Looks like we have a question over here.
Yes, thank you very much. Yesterday I did see your film, and I think it was very, very powerful. I have one question that I think is important in that frequently it's talked about as though it's about refugees, and most of the people in the film were not yet refugees. They were, in fact, trying to get to Europe or some other places, and frequently had to use smugglers to get there because the systems were not in place that they could get there on their own. And you were documenting them once they got there and their treatment, but I was wondering what your view on and conversations with them in terms of this kind of contradiction between, you know, smugglers as manipulators who are earning money and exploiting people to move them out of dangerous situations to try to get them to Greece or to Turkey or to other places, and the other view that smugglers are in some ways saviors and providing a service in a very, very difficult situation when the international system is not functioning.
I think you are trying to create a misunderstanding about those people, and even there's big business among the smugglers. Of course, it's $1 billion business only because Europeans cannot provide a safe passage. People are dying. You have to really acknowledge there's thousands or tens of thousands of people dying. You know, people dying every day trying to be in the, you know, to pay anything possible to save their children. And you often see on the boat their children without adult attend. You know, you would see, you know, volunteers hold the baby, but there's no mom or daddy with the baby because simply they just cannot pay for the smugglers, which is not much money, 1,500, sometimes 500, and depends. And but still, many people use all their money in the whole journey. It's not only across the ocean, but they have been in the whole. Yeah, the whole journey is very difficult. It sometimes takes months for them even to reach a safe area.
I think our last question goes to you.
A lot of the work from the Good Fences show was on or near public transit. Did you have any urge to work near or in the airport as a borderland?
She was asking, many of your installations for Good Fences, Make Good Neighbors were around different locations of the city, including bus stops and other public transit places. Did you ever think about using the airports in New York?
As artists doing projects like this is extremely complicated. It's not where I want to put it. It's really, you know, we have a public art fund has to use all their resource and their intelligence, professionally in dealing with all kind of legislations and different levels in the city, park department, transportation, and you know, from mayor to the people really neighborhood. You know, you also have to really have discussions with neighborhood. So it's very complicated project, and I'm only worked on giving allowance of the city. Yeah.
Okay. Just want to ask one more thing that our host actually had brought up, which is, how do you have such a strong commitment to your art and your life's work, not knowing where it may take you, knowing that it may involve risks such as being detained for years on end? I mean, not knowing the future, how do you make that strong commitment to your art?
Again, it's not really commitment. It's not, it's really about, if you look at life, what you really care about, and what make you happy and what will make you unhappy. And I think those things are very essential, and I always act with my intuition, I should say, first thought about the situation. And those things are leading me to a lot of unpredicted situation. And mostly, I'm very happy about where I am, I'm very easy to be happy. I'm a quite happy person, so that's true.
Good. Well, we are all happy that you were here with us tonight. Thank you so much, Weiwei. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks very much.